Good day everyone. In this video we are going to look at the process as a whole in more detail. The purpose of this video is to sketch the entire process picture before going into details for each step in later videos. Remember that this process is proposed based on the grid code and other regulations. Some aspects may be modified based on the specific distributor's requirements or existing procedures. These will be highlighted in this video and discussed in more detail in later videos. Section 2 of the guide document is the heart of the document and contains the steps to be followed by the distributor. In the next few slides, we will briefly discuss each step so that all the steps can be seen in their appropriate order. The guide provides the steps to be followed by the distributor. It starts at the application phase up to commercial operation. It provides a high-level overview of the customer processes that operate in parallel to the distributor. Note that the customer will start with feasibility studies, etc. before approaching the distributor, and also need to consider aspects beyond commercial operation. For instance, allowance for decommissioning and site restoration is also included as part of Section 3, Financial Considerations. We have already encountered the 9 steps. Let us put them in a flow diagram. The flow diagram we are going to use has swim lanes. In other words, each row indicates a specific role player in the process. Let us start with the customer, here in the grey lane, and the distributor in the green lane. These are the key role players in this process. At the top, in orange, is government and regulators. In other words, acts that regulate the industry and NERSA. At the bottom, in blue, are other parties, such as end customers who purchase electricity from a generator, or other distributors with whom wheeling agreements need to be concluded. For step 1, the customer approaches the distributor, indicating that it wants to install a generator. The distributor should provide all relevant information, typically in the form of an information pack. Here, information pack is shown across 2 swim lanes, since the distributor supplies the information pack and the customer uses it. Based on the information provided, the customer can consider whether they want to proceed, and if so, they complete the application, pay the application fee, and submits this to the distributor. Steps 2 and 3 may be combined, but it's recommended that it's done separately. The first evaluation in step 2 includes the grid impact assessment and high-level costing. In other words, the output is a cost estimate letter provided to the customer. The cost estimate is not intended to be binding, since parallel projects may compete for the same network infrastructure, which could affect the final costs. The estimated costing will allow the customer to see if the project remains feasible. If the customer accepts this, the process proceeds to step 3. For step 3, the customer is more committed and more details of the evaluation is done. Step 3 commences after the customer paid the budget quote fee, which may be a substantial portion of the final estimated cost. During this step, a final assessment is done on the available grid capacity. In other words, can the network accommodate the generator, or has other developments taken up some of the capacity? The design is started to ensure that the budget quote is more accurate, and the customer is issued with a budget quote, which they have to accept before proceeding to step 4. During step 4, the legal and contracting requirements need to be agreed upon. It is listed as a separate step, but typically occurs in parallel with many of the other steps. For example, the information pack should include at least a connection agreement example. Other aspects, such as the power quality emission limits included in the connection agreement, may only be available after the design has been concluded. However, it is important that the distributor and customer understand the requirements of all relevant agreements and which parts may still change and the potential impacts thereof at this stage. Also, once the customer has accepted the budget quote, a letter of consent should be issued to the customer, which is required for licensing or registration purposes with NERSA. This is not the cost estimate letter or budget quote. It's a letter that states that there is network capacity and the customer has signed the necessary agreements. Step 4 also includes the environmental, land use and other authorizations, which will be required either before construction can begin or at least before commercial operation will be allowed. Note that many, although not all, of these authorizations falls outside the municipality's jurisdiction. Step 5 is the design process for both parties. Note that regulatory and statutory requirements also affect the design process. For instance, management of voltage regulation, appropriate reliability, etc. Step 5 includes all technical and financial evaluations of the proposed project as well. It is at this stage that the grid code compliance, listed as Step 8, becomes more important. Final designs of the generating plant needs to ensure that grid code compliance will be achieved. Once all designs have been approved, relevant authorizations obtained, construction can begin. The distributor is responsible for their own infrastructure construction and shall monitor and approve the customer's connection equipment. Step 7 is commissioning, which may overlap to some extent with Step 6, construction, since parts of equipment may be tested and commissioned before the project is completed. The distributor remains responsible for all aspects of commissioning that affect their plant or network. In other words, all connection works, new lines and transformers. Confirmation of safe operation of the generating plant is also required, for instance anti-island, voltage control, etc. Note that the generation plant needs to be fully commissioned before grid code compliance can be obtained, although testing during this phase will prepare for grid code compliance. Grid code compliance is proven to NERSA, although the distributor has a role in the evaluation thereof. Some aspects, such as compliance to power quality emission limits, is the responsibility of the distributor to approve and advise NERSA via RETEC that the plant is compliant. In the final step, the distributor checks that all the necessary authorizations, agreements and compliances are in place before closeout and formally advises the customer, e.g. in a letter, that the plant is compliant and may now operate commercially. We have looked at the 9 steps in section 2 in a bit more detail. The customer submits an application, which contains a bit more information than the SSEG application form. The application is evaluated by the distributor, usually in phases, steps 2 and 3. The distributor can only then provide a quote for the customer to connect to the grid, along with updated agreements and requirements. The quote typically covers any equipment or updates that's required by the distributor to ensure technically viable and safe connection to the grid. Following on additional requirements, new connection agreements and possibly a few others will be required to be entered into between the distributor and the customer. Design refers to both parties doing the detailed design to ensure both the network and the new generation plant meets the technical and safety requirements. Similarly, construction refers to the phase where the new infrastructure is being built. The generator commissioning is the customer's responsibility, while the distributor would sign off on all aspects that may affect the network, including all new distribution assets. Grid code compliance of the embedded generator is considered in Step 8. It focuses on the generator requirements and specifies where the distributor is involved. Finally, authorizations closeout allows the generator customer to operate commercially. We will discuss any questions and comments during the Q&A session. If you have not done so, take a minute and jot down the questions you have. Also look for additional information under the Materials tab and prepare for the quiz at the end of the day.